we have all this qualitative data. That takes a lot of time. So I think AI is going to play a really key role in helping marketers and public relations professionals sort through all of this and be able to start finding trends and commonalities much quicker. My background and my educational journey has nothing to do with marketing or public relations or communications. Not in the traditional sense. I actually come from a performing arts background. I'm a classical musician, and I trained all my life to perform in opera orchestras and symphony orchestras, and I actually traveled quite a lot around the world, toured all over Russia, had a job in Austria, and a few positions here in the United States. So my job as an artist was very simple. Was to take information that was codified by other people and give it life, give it meaning, and communicate it to others. So the job of a musician often when you're performing is to really collaborate with others and present something that's going to be transformational for the audience who is in front of you, whether that happens to be a recording or it happens to be a live performance. One of the most amazing things is, I was touring places where I just didn't know the language. I don't speak Russian, I don't speak Armenian, I don't speak a lot of these places I was in, but we could communicate through the love of music. And I knew that there was magic in that. There was magic in being able to translate information in a way that created an emotional connection with somebody else. That began this journey of using the sort of data points. A music score is a collection of data. It's a collection of information, right? It's limited. Your job is to interpret it and to do something with it. So it started my curiosity of how this information, number one, is codified, how it's interpreted, and how it's delivered. I went through a variety of different stages in my life. One of them was as a journalist, because I had a background in arts and music, that I could write about the subject, that I understood the cultural implications of what it means to be an artist in the 20th and 21st century, especially in the United States and actually around the world because of my travels. And that led into an understanding of how to activate media channels to create community around passions. Right? So again, looking at data, looking at what people were interested in, what the engagement rates were like, what people were responding to, the connections that I made simply because I was, putting out things that were of importance to me, which led to sort of this interesting evolution. And instead of doing it for a publication or for the arts, then transitioning into growing a public relations agency that really connects clients with audiences that matter most to them. There are two things that are very disconnected, right? Performing arts, classical music, and marketing and public relations. But in essence, once you distill both disciplines to their core, which is about communications, which is about connection and creating a sense of belonging, that the disciplines are actually universal. When you go to music school and when you study things like music history and music theory and the life of the composer, what life was like in 19th century Italy or 18th century Russia, and what the context through which this information was being provided to you, you realize that a music score of notes is incomplete. Right? You have the notes, you have the time, you give an idea of how fast it goes, how loud you play, how soft you play. Do you play notes that are long or that are short? But then there's a lot more to it that you need to be informed about. So you have information that's very concrete. That's a note, I need to play it long, short, loud, soft, high, or low. But then there's a context, right? This was written at a time where these things were going on, or there may have been a war, they may have been like these things around there that give more meaning to what you're looking at. So the data is there, a music score is data, but it also needs to be interpreted, right? And it's one of the magic, I think, of interpretation, that you can have different people looking at the same thing and derive different lessons from it. right? Derive different meaning from it. So just as data is also really important, is the knowledge of how this data fits into the context of what you're looking at in order to make informed decisions as to how to best then deliver it to the public that matters. Like for me in music was, what's my story? Right? What is the story that I want to tell that's going to get people to remember it, to connect with it, and to have some sort of meaning? In marketing and public relations is exactly the same thing, right? Data tells probably about 50% of the story. The context and the understanding of human sentiment, human nature, human trends, what's happening in the cultural zeitgeist gives the rest. Some people think of it in very creative fields, and in a way they are. Like you need to connect the dots, but everything begins with a foundation of data, right? And if our job is to engage publics, right? Engage the different publics of our clients, whether it happens to be internal employees, the internal communities, external communities, government, media, whoever is important to our particular clients, understanding them is at the root of the success of every campaign. And whether understanding them means where they live, what they think, what their life is, it's all rooted in a combination of understanding both qualitative and quantitative data, right? And how they're responding to these things. So we're then able to better create campaigns that start with a foundation. So you're not, best practices have their place in all marketing and public relations, but we also want to make sure that we're not making assumptions, right? So that foundation begins by looking at the data that we have, in addition to looking at the data that we need to source. So everything for us starts with that foundation of looking at both what's happening with the organization, what's happening by looking at the data that they have and looking at the data that's available. Both primary and secondary sources are critical to really understanding how to set our clients for success. Oh, there's always a challenge with data, right? There's sometimes we see one or two extremes. One is that we have too much, right? And we don't know what to look at or what's relevant. So I think the data collection exercise is important to think about what data you're collecting in order for it to be actionable later down the road. There's a saying that it's around the industry, analysis paralysis, where you see so much and you don't know how to get started because you just have too much information. So that's always been a challenge to understand what is it that we're looking at so we can assess the right outcome and the right goals for each particular campaign and each particular client, or we don't have the right data available, right? So often the kinds of things that I have is things that are available from the client side. So it's a little easier to look at things like, social listening data, right? Or what's happening on their website through Google Analytics, or doing a sentiment analysis between what's covered in media. There's wonderful platforms that gives us idea of share of voice and those kinds of things. But what sometimes is difficult is the customer sentiment data, right? And how do qualitative data is so much more difficult to analyze than quantitative. So to really understand the emotional facet of the end user's frame of mind is always a little bit more of a challenge, right? Because there's more left out to interpretation than numbers. You can't argue with math, you can't argue with science, you can't argue with that, but it is up to interpretation. There's a little bit more of a gray area on qualitative that gives the opportunity for more departures and tangents of interpretation. It depends if I put my marketing hat on or my public relations hat on, right? So if I'm thinking marketing, I am tying everything to the objectives that are set up by the client. And those usually are conversions, right? I'm thinking very much conversions. I'm thinking, all right, so what is those conversions? Is it, ebook downloads? Are they sales? Are they leads? Are they donors for my nonprofit clients? What is it? How do they descend in a very traditional marketing funnel approach, right? Where are my people at top of the funnel, general awareness, consideration, conversion, and how many people are going through this process? So I'm looking at hard numbers, right? I'm looking at things like churn rates. I'm looking at the KPIs could be, visits to the website, click-through rates. I'm looking at bounce rates, any drop-offs, anything that can help us re-engage. I'm with a marketing hat, I'm really looking at conversions as the end goal. Now, if I'm have my hat on as a public relations professional, that becomes a lot more difficult, right? Because public relations is really about maintaining, for me, it's about maintaining a reputation, right? It's about reputation management. And we look at everything through this. Is the result really of what our clients are doing and what they say, but really is about resonance with the consumer, with their target audiences. So it becomes about measuring what others say about the organization. There's a famous quote about brand and brand reputation. It's what people say when you're not in the room. Well, how do you listen to that? Right? So that becomes a whole different challenge of influencing behavior and understanding sentiment. So some of the measurement that we'll do for that is definitely more on the focus group side and surveys and looking at trends over time. What are maybe keywords that are being talked about in social media? Is a trending conversation going positive? Has it shifted in a certain way? Are we seeing conversation shifted to align with the brand values and the stories and the emotions that we're putting through in these campaigns that are aimed at something very different, right? Public relations, when a brand's reputation is enhanced, all business functions become easier, including marketing and including sales. It's just a little harder to be able to identify the true north, the true measurement of success, other than looking like a holistic view of all these indicators. Marketing is one of them, right? Marketing is just one, conversions is one. The other things, there's a lot more qualitative data in there, and it's a little bit trickier to gather, but there are tools available that help us tell that story. But again, we have to sift through it to really understand what it means in the context of everything that's going on. Social listening is certainly one that's where we take a look at right at the beginning, right, and understand what are the big keywords, what are the conversations, what is general sentiment, where does it sit, where we set up also benchmarks against our clients' comp set, right? What are the competitors? Where is that language? Where can we create areas where we're creating a little bit of the blue ocean, an area where they create an uncontested space where they're known specifically for a particular value, product or service. So we start working with them by setting up benchmarks there. Certainly surveys are a big part of this. So ongoing, maybe quarterly, or depending on the cadence of the work that we're doing for them, quarterly surveys, monthly surveys, help us really understand where the conversation is going to really assess what are the emotional triggers that people have when they're thinking about a brand. And are they aligning with the pillars that we've set up that are also aligned with corporate values, right? So we're setting those kinds of elements, and of course, also the share of voice is really important. Earned media continues to be, especially now, anything in the earned space, people trust people that are closest to them, that are not associated with a brand. So influencer relations, influencer marketing continues to be like a really important part. Word of mouth endorsements are huge. Now, when I say influencer relations, influencer marketing, I think there's more of there's more trust paid to smaller influencers, niche influencers, not in the sense that they're, they don't have a career as an influencer. They just happen to be because of who they are and how they serve their communities. So it's paying attention to what's happening in that space as well. Those are the kinds of things that we're looking at, and we're leveraging those numbers to really understand the benchmark that we started with and how that's shifting based on the strategies and tactics that we implemented for our clients. I think anybody who's entering this profession needs to understand that learning is a key component of being in this business, right? We in school, and I'm a professor of marketing and communications at a university here, and I have to before every single lecture go over everything for the past year, like even if it's the same curriculum that I taught the year before, because everything changes at the drop of a hat. And to stay ahead, both on what's happening in the media channel side, like what's happening there and what's happening with the consumers and how both are interacting with one another, is always going to be the secret sauce that will enable you to be most effective for your clients and for yourself. You have to go in this with an attitude of learning and an attitude of experimentation, right? That often you have some of the answers, but you don't have all the answers, because the answers are going to change, right? So what you did yesterday might not work today or tomorrow, but maybe it's something that happened 10 years ago. It's now works, right? Because consumer sentiment may have changed. There may have been current events that's making people think about different things. I think something that has become really evident in the past 3 years is that, this world of communications, this world of PR, we need ourselves and our clients to set them up to be of service to the communities that they're trying to attract. It's become the differentiator between one brand and another. So understanding at their root the motivations of the end consumer, and again, those change, is going to be key. So I think if you go in this with an attitude that you're always a student of the discipline and you never have all the answers, and be comfortable with that, right? To always be in this constant evolution of developing your mind, your knowledge. And often that only happens if you allow yourself experimentation and forgive yourself and allow yourself to fail, right? Like failure also has the opportunity to give you insights of what didn't work, so you can actually work on what could possibly work. Collaboration is also incredibly important, right? When we're working on strategies with my team, I need minds from every single type of discipline. So going into this profession with an attitude of learning and an attitude of collaboration and teamwork, I think it's going to serve people really well. Actually, whether you're new in this business or whether you're a seasoned professional, it's always good to remind yourself.